Welcome to the Skiffy and Fanty Show.
She was made of fear and longing and the dirt on the bottoms of her feet from walking barefoot. She was made of roots that stretched as veins through her body, and as she lay trying to sleep in a house in the middle of nowhere, she imagined those veins pushing out through the bottoms of her feet and climbing down into the wooden floors, drilling through to find any substance that might hydrate her.
Who wrote that?
Who did?
That is a great question. I'm Shaun.
I'm Daniel.
And today we are joined by Bonnie Jo Stufflebeam, who is a two-time Nebula Award finalist whose short fiction and poetry has appeared in, my lord, nearly 100 publications. That's a lot of publications. That includes Lightspeed, Uncanny, LeVar Burton Reads, and some other many other places we because we'd be here for like 5 minutes naming all the places. She's also the author of the collection Where You Linger in Other Stories and the novella Glorious Fiends. But today we're here to talk about a very creepy book called Grim Root from Dark Matter Inc., which is out as of this recording. And whenever you hear it, it is out now. You can go buy all your money can go into it right now. It's like investing in really good stock. Because
many copies, multiple formats.
If you can't sell it back to anybody, it's okay. You still got a great book out of the deal. But if you can't sell a bad stock, you're just out money. Better than stocks. Buy books. Anyway, welcome to the show, Bonnie.
Thank you. Hi, it's nice to be here.
Thanks for joining us.
This experience is going to be a weird one.
If my book is like stock, then I've got tons of it.
That's true.
Wow.
You're rolling in it. You're rolling in the book stock dough thing. Not really money though, like stock. It's more imaginary than imaginary numbers, isn't it?
It's as paper as money.
Okay.
Screw NVIDIA.
All right. Before we get into our weird discussion, a reminder to our listeners to please share your questions and comments with us at skiffyandfanty.com, listener suggestions. If you aren't already, please join us on Twitch on Shaun's Alphabet Streams channels each Friday at 7 p.m. Central to be a part of our live interactive streaming format. And please tell folks about the show and review us wherever you get your podcasts. Word of mouth is a really big deal for fan-run podcasts, and so we need your help to find new ears for our ridiculous weirdness.
We do. Oh, a big first question, and this is a good one because it'll give you an opportunity to tell people who've not read it, what is this book about? So what is Grim Root?
Yeah, so my easiest pitch is that it's The Bachelor meets Haunting of Hill House. So it is about a group of contestants on a reality TV dating show who have to go to a haunted house for a week in order to win the heart of the Bachelor, who is, going to marry one of them, presumably, in the end. And basically, the house is... something's up with the house. I won't give it away if it is haunted or not, but weird shit starts to happen.
So it really just like a reality TV show episode of The Bachelor.
Yeah, exactly. So, it's got drama between the women, and two of the women start to fall for one another instead of the groom. And so that's, everyone wishes that happened on reality TV all the time. So
that'd be
drama with the producers.
Drama with the producers. Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be more fun. It was The Bachelor. Fun. It's now The Bachelorettes.
So how many episodes of The Bachelor did you watch for this? in
A lot.
preparation? Or were there other like reality shows like that you kind of dipped into as well?
Yeah, I watch a lot of reality TV dating shows. They're easy to keep on in the background because they rely on tropes. And I work for a romance video game anyway, so it's like, they get the vibes into the air of all the romancy drama. So it's easy to have when I'm working at my day job. So yeah, I watch The Bachelor, The Bachelorette. Um, I watch all of the Netflix ones. So, what are they called? Just came out. Oh, Love is Blind. I watched that one.
Oh, yes.
Love Island. I'll put on any dating reality TV show.
Is Love is Blind the one that they have like multiple country versions of it too?
Yes.
Or is that okay?
Yeah. 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 I mean, I recognize, what's creepy about reality TV, and that's part of the appeal. But I also just like, I am genuinely interested in, the dynamics among people on reality TV shows. So
There's a show on Netflix called Love on the Spectrum.
I watched that one. Yeah.
I didn't know that was a thing, but apparently it is, and good for them.
Yeah.
The BBC, I don't know if you ever watched, like, the BBC will occasionally do, I don't even know what you call them. They're like, it's like a dating show they have where it's less sensational, but they'll do one where it is people with, various degrees on the spectrum, and like trying to like get them to meet and like talk to each other, and it's like the cutest thing of these like, like 20 somethings with, varying degrees of social skills, like going on dates and talking, and they're being romantic, but they're being romantic in a very specific way that like the rest of us would typically not think of as very romantic, and it's kind of the most adorable thing in the world.
Yeah, Love on the Spectrum is less sensational than, Love Island or Love is Blind. So they do treat the subject matter with, some finesse, which is good. I'm glad that they chose to do it that way.
Yeah, it could go bad, I suppose.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, for sure.
And Grimrood really captures that of everything going bad as it can get. At the same time, sort of having fun with that the self-conscious, or the conscious, I guess, guilty pleasure of it all, where even those taking part in the journey are still like well aware of how much bullshit this is, and that there's a scariness to it that they're being forced to embrace, and it's very recognizable in that.
Thank you. Yeah, that was my aim. I also read a lot of biographies of people who worked on shows and were in the shows themselves. So
that does make me wonder, because I have two sort of questions that are like different ends of this issue. But when you think about like reality TV, it's on the outside it seems like a thing not really built for horror, because it's like, look at these fun people doing, like, they're going on dates and being cute, and isn't this like very fun, and it's all very, like, a lot of pageantry, and like we can kind of recognize it's trying to tell us a story with semi-real stuff. But obviously, if as you mentioned, you've probably read sort of how some reality TV is kind of very exploitative, and there's a lot of darkness underneath there, and that's where I think to some degree there can be a lot of really horrific ideas that get explored. And I was kind of curious how much of, given that you've mentioned already now that you did a bunch of reading of like people's experiences on these shows and so on, how much of that sort of stuff we don't see as consumers of it kind of influenced the story you wanted to tell here.
Yeah, I am very interested in the production and what goes on behind the scenes. I have a friend who worked on Joe Millionaire, which is one of the first reality TV shows, dating reality TV shows. And so, I spoke to him about the roles that producers held, and he told me some wild stories. There's a TV show that's fiction. It's called Unreal. And I watched that show, and it pulls a lot from this producer's account of her time on the show. So it is a fictionalized account, but some of it is from reality. And then, you can just read about lawsuits constantly happening between contestants and the companies that produce these shows, and, all of the things that they say go on, and, the really restrictive contracts, where if you talk about what occurred on the show, you have to pay millions and millions of dollars to the company. So a lot, a lot of that went into the book, for sure.
You mentioned a fictionalized account of the reality, and that's what's so funny about this all, is that even the reality is like a fictionalized version of realities, that everybody's kind of playing that game, which is interesting. To take that concept, I think it does merge really easily into the horror realm, the horror side of things, and those horror tropes.
Yeah, that's another thing I really like is it's the people who watch it, it's like wrestling. It's like WWF. Like, they know it's not entirely real, but part of it is believing in the fantasy and giving into the fantasy and letting that like overtake you. And then part of it is knowing that it's not real and knowing what to expect, and then enjoying when they break those rules or when they lean into them. So yeah, like you mentioned, the journey, and that is something that, all of these reality TV shows, they have a language. And it's not necessarily that, I mean, sometimes the producers are saying you have to use this word instead of this word. But part of it is that everyone has just watched these shows, who's on these shows. And so they know the beats that they're supposed to do. They know that, oh, when I'm on the second date with the guy, I'm supposed to reveal my tragic backstory. Like, that is the time for that. And so I'm really interested in the tropes of reality TV versus the tropes of horror. And, when you're reading a horror book, you know what to expect. Things are not going to end well at the end of that book. But you'll see the author like twisting and turning the horror tropes in ways that are intriguing. And I think for that reason, I think reality TV and horror go really well together.
Like that. You're making me think of. I mentioned it. We interviewed Eden Rice earlier today, as of the recording, I should say. And so you made me immediately think of when we were talking about like horror, and specifically the like kind of ways in which humor has been woven into it at times. Like, horror can go very, very dark, but sometimes horror can sort of split between those two emotions. And you mentioning like horror and reality TV kind of going together, it made me think of the question I want to ask, really, which is, this is also a bit of a humorous concept, because reality TV sort of on its face is kind of absurd. I mean, we're going to do a show called The Bachelor, where you have like however many women all vying for the attentions of one man. It is already kind of humorously, like, even just saying it out loud sounds ridiculous. Um, and yet it is a thing that, millions of people love to watch, and they get great entertainment out of. So there is this sort of splitting between, in the horror, like, we move into the dark and then we go into these very lighthearted spaces, seemingly at opposite ends, and yet for some reason they do often work very effectively together. I'm kind of curious, from your view as a writer of the genre, why do you think they do sort of intersect and work even in this particular book?
Yeah. So I love horror humor. Like, that is what I like to read. I don't like to, take these concepts too seriously. But then I like books that then eventually delve into like a really serious element of it. So I do like those extremes of light and dark. It's like you get the catharsis, you get, you have all the tension build up, and then the tension, dissolves. And I mean, that's similar to humor. Like, horror has tension, that's like suspense, something bad is going to happen. Humor is like, where's the punchline coming? And then, the punchline comes and the tension is broken. And that's a really interesting analog, uh, parallel between them. What was your question? Why do they work so well together? Yeah, I think for me, it's the tropes thing. Like, these scripts that we know we're supposed to fall into, and then like when we're reading horror, we know that the horror is going to fall into these very particular scripts. And so I think, yeah, I guess the interplay. again.
There's something meta to the interplay when I was reading the novel too, in the sense of trying to think how to phrase this. So there's within horror or within reality TV, there's an element of trying to predict what's going to happen. And so the contestants of the groom within Grimroot are trying to sort of like predict who is going to ultimately be the one that gets Tristan, that gets the groom. And there's a certain amount of discussion of, is it fixed? Is it already predetermined who's going to be the winner? And are we just wasting our time here going through the motions kind of thing? The same thing kind of happened as I was reading it as a horror reader, trying to predict who's going to die. Is it going to be the predetermined way according to the tropes of horror of who's going to die and who's going to make it, or what's responsible for all the bad shit, the supernatural shit, as it were? Or is it going to be a twist on that? And so there's like that interplay of the tropes as well, both within the novel and then as a reader of the novel.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, as you know, the horror genre has had enough time to really sink into the public mind, and then reality TV has done the same. Yeah, we do start to guess, and we do start to say, oh, is there going to be a final girl with this one, or is the final girl going to die, or are they going to totally twist it and it's not a final girl at all, it's a final guy, or a final monster? Does the monster win in the end?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for sure. I like that point.
Or who's going to get together with the groom, right? Or
Yeah.
is it even going to be that
Yeah.
is that how the romance is going to end up, or is it going to be something else?
Yeah.
So there's just so much you can do in this playground, as it were, that makes it interesting. Yeah.
I think that is a part of what people like about these reality TV dating shows, like The Bachelor, too. There's all these blogs that pop up around these shows where people do try to predict, and they watch the episodes to see, like, the next on, is there a hint of this character who might go home in this episode? Do we think that they went home? Are they the front runner? Are they the one that's going to get with him in the end? Oh, we're going to research like the marriage licenses that were given out in this county around the time that the show would have ended, to try to see if they do get married. And yeah, so there's like this whole community that enjoys trying to guess.
That is curious, because you would think that would suggest to me that, and I don't watch a lot of reality TV. Maybe you can speak to this as someone who watches considerably more than I do. There are obviously tropes, right? Common features that we see throughout. But if people are watching that intently, surely these shows are making decisions to like deliberately go against themselves, essentially, what people are expecting, because otherwise, like, if every show follows the same exact thing exactly to a T, they stop having things to talk about. And so I'm curious, is that a thing you see in reality TV, that there are certain common features, but that sometimes what you expect is like the exact opposite or something along those lines?
Yeah, you'll see them trying to switch it up, and sometimes it's obvious. Like with Love is Blind, there was last season, and I don't like, these shows are on in the background for me mostly, so I forget the names of the characters as soon as the shows are over. But yeah, you'll see, like, if people were complaining in the prior season that there was too much drama and not enough romance, like, you'll see them start to highlight the characters who are a little more romancy, because they don't always show all of the contestants. Some contestants they'll cut from the final edit, and then they'll do the villain edit on other contestants, like, who like to fight a little bit more, and they can kind of showcase them as like someone who causes trouble.
That reminds me of like 90 Day Fiance, where like sometimes they get the cutest little couple that mostly really work well together, and then they'll get like two people who really should not be together, who are like horrendous to each other, and you're just like, how does this how how does this, right? Like, You're crying every episode, and he's calling you horrible names. Why are you still with this man, or the opposite? And I guess to some degree it is because of what you're suggesting, right? That is what keeps us very interested, but you can't do too much of
Mhm.
it because then it might get across the line.
Yeah, there's like a very delicate balance between the drama and the romance.
Hmm.
And so for me, like being a producer on these shows must be like being a writer, an author in some ways. Like you have to learn to balance the different genres that you're working in.
That sounds
So
exhausting.
the main antagonist, I guess, of the novel is a producer. So I'm curious what went into her creation for you. Was it solely sort of just looking at those reality dating shows and how producers act, or is there more to that? I don't want to spoil things, but particularly in terms of then how things end up going for her to the end and what's revealed.
Yeah, the producer is the main antagonist. And I think I was really interested in this idea of somebody who's behind the scenes and who is able to manipulate the things that are happening. And, they have power over these contestants. She's got information on various contestants' past and mistakes they made, and she's made promises to them to wipe their slates clean, or to give them a good edit, make them seem like they're the hero in the story, when maybe they had a bad run of news stories. The main character had something happen to her that she wouldn't want people to know about. And so Deja, the producer, promises her that, oh, you'll be beloved once you're on this show. We'll show them that you're a good person who, is able to connect easily with others, and um, is a nice person. Even if you don't win the show, you'll still come out looking good.
Do you find so typically when you with reality TV, we're dealing with like authenticity means something very different in reality TV because one may not necessarily be their authentic self, kind of like on social media, right? You might be a snippet or a version or a like distortion of yourself on reality TV. So to some degree, it kind of suggests that in writing an antagonist or a villain, I think Daniel used maybe earlier the word meta, which I think that to some degree is very present here, but also like is kind of complicated because in a traditional novel, like if you just have somebody who's the antagonist or the villain, like they fill a very that they're if they're it only doesn't come out to be true if like the novel has a twist at the end where like oh secretly the hero was the villain, which maybe doesn't always work. But here, right, someone could be a villain who's not actually really that way in real life, and someone could be being good and actually be a horrible monster in
Mhm.
real life. So it gets really complicated, and I'm kind of curious in the context of this sort of framework, what does sort of an antagonist really mean from a sort of writerly perspective?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I did want to play with the way that people are on the TV when the cameras are rolling, and then how they are off screen. And it's hard in a reality TV environment when you're on that set and the set is the whole house, right? So, even when they're talking privately, there's still a chance that they could be being filmed. And sometimes in the book, they are being filmed. Um, so I think for me, the antagonist, I definitely wanted her to be, because these are real people filming a reality TV show. So I wanted, I mean, not they're not real people, they're fictional people, but they're real to me. I wanted them to seem real on the page. And so I wanted her to have motivations that were a little bit understandable, and for her to have her own arc as well, because yeah, like you said, no one is what they seem on reality TV. There are people who are there because they want to be reality TV famous. There are probably people who are there because they actually believe that reality TV could give them the romance that they've been wanting. I mean, it's also, as viewers, like, we can never really know what their motivations are. We can just guess. And yeah, so that's part of what I wanted to give to Deja as well, the antagonist.
And the two protagonists of
And two.
of the novel, they're sort of like the mirror image of that in some ways, because they are the recipients of the. Is that how I'd phrase it? Like, they're being exploited. They are the. To some way, everybody is, I guess, being exploited in this, but they don't have much power here, and they don't necessarily have. They haven't quite figured out their identities yet, in large ways, and it's going through the horror, going through this, ironically, in this very false environment where they begin to find bits and pieces of their true selves, in a way, their authentic selves. And so was that, maybe you disagree with that, but is that sort of like where you were going with the novel from the beginning, or?
Yeah. I wanted them to be characters who found their autonomy throughout the course of the story. And especially, so Sabrina was actually a character who was added in like a much later draft, but Linda was like the original protagonist. And for her especially, I wanted her to kind of not know who she is. This bad thing has happened to her. She's done something bad in her past. Is she going to let that define her? And is that all that she is? And, she's the divorcee on the show. So she's like, even her role on the show is, the dark past. Because if you're divorced on a reality TV show, you have to admit that, like, it's this deep, dark secret. And so that's something I wanted to address with her character. But yeah.
So that's a real thing that happens in those shows?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay.
Yeah, as someone who's been divorced, it's like that's something that became very obvious to me as I was watching these shows, and I'm really interested in that whole perspective and how they treat that. And yeah, so I wanted them to kind of be these malleable blank slates, and Deja realizes that, the antagonist realizes that, and tries to mold and shape them while they're on camera, but one of them kind of leans into it and the other starts to lean away from it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Can we talk about the house? Because it's weird.
Gloriously weird.
Yes. Gloriously weird. I don't know that I've ever seen somebody like. I don't even know if is there any reality show that like tries to be set in a fake or a real quote unquote haunted house? Because I've never heard of that
before. I don't know of one.
I don't know one either, and I'm curious why nobody has done this, because you'd think this would be great entertainment, a fake haunted house, right, where like creepy things happen. And like, oh my god, and it's fun watching people get scared while they're also trying to cuddle up and all these kinds of things. You could have fun with it, but it is an interesting twist that I frankly don't think I've ever seen on a haunted house, making it the set of a television show that is itself a work of crafted fiction of a sort, where you've placed these people in very uncomfortable situations, in some cases rather gruesomely so, and so I'm why what's the deal, Bonnie? Why this haunted house, and when are we starting the reality show set in the haunted house?
Yeah, I mean, have your people call my people. Let's start it tomorrow. Yeah, I love haunted houses because they scare me. I am legitimately scared of ghosts, and I'm legitimately scared of a place that is supposed to be your home that is hostile to you, like in whatever way. It is one of the only horror tropes that actually gives me nightmares, and I cannot read it in bed. So I think that is why I wrote it. But of course, I kind of wanted to do. I also love body horror, and body horror is something that kind of scares me if I think too hard about it. But I can watch a Cronenberg movie and just be icked out and not freaked out. So I wanted to combine body horror with this thing that really genuinely scares me, which is a haunted house. And that's how I won't spoil anything, but that's how I got this house.
I'm curious if you could unpack a little bit. What is it? So you say that haunted houses are the thing that like scare you the most, Right? Mine are zombies because I don't want to be eaten, and I can't do it. But to be clear, eaten by other people who aren't alive. I can handle being eaten by a shark. I mean, obviously, I don't want that to happen to me. Makes sense, but like that doesn't scare me nearly as much as like a half alive person ripping my entrails out. That's too much. Uh, but I'm curious for you, what is it that really like? Why is that so scary? The haunted house, just like conceptually.
I think it's because I can be in bed and in danger. Bed is my happy place. I do not want to be scared when I'm in bed. And when I have nightmares or I have night terrors, so I'll wake up with night terrors, and it's the worst thing, because then you're supposed to be in this place that you can just cuddle up. And I mean, like when it's good, bed is the most amazing thing ever. You sleep for 8, 9 hours, 10 hours, I don't know. You wake up feeling refreshed. It's warm when it's cold outside, and just for like that whole thing to be disrupted, that's why I hate haunted houses, because they mess with bedtime.
Yellow wallpaper probably has an extra layer of meaning then. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah. That's a really good point though. Yeah.
Yeah, they like steal that comfort and familiarity from you to put you at like the ultimate unease.
Yeah. I grew up in a house that was like, it was a really interesting house. My parents, they own land, and they built this house. Like they moved onto the land when the house was not built. They hired builders. This house, was like, theirs. Um, and I grew up in the same house my entire childhood. And then, as I got older and started to learn more about the human psyche, I realized that this house, was not necessarily like the warmest place and the best place to be because of, growing up in my father is an alcoholic. So growing up in an alcoholic household, it kind of changes the way that you view your childhood once you get older and start thinking about it. And so I think that has also made me fascinated with houses. This place that I was told as a kid was like so great, and it was so beloved to my family, that then later became this scary thing. Like that is, it's rich material in my brain for sure.
A lot of meat there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, so something else that I heard in an interview, if I could ask this to take a slightly different direction, um, maybe it was it might not have been an interview, it might have been like talking on some blog somewhere, but you had like mentioned this thing about, I guess some people think of horror or certain genres and horror being one of them as not a space for like basically romantic type materials, right? In this case, sometimes steamy romantic stuff because there is like a shower scene, and I won't say anything more about why that scene's important in the book, but I think it's a pretty important scene in the book. Um, so I guess I'm kind of to me, that question, that like concern doesn't make sense to me because like we're what I don't get it, but I'm kind of curious. I mean, maybe not this book wasn't necessarily deliberately trying to challenge that idea, but sort of maybe inadvertently so. And kind of how do you see that kind of operating here? I mean, or where does that idea come from about that horror is not space for them?
I
I'm
don't
just
know.
curious.
That has always confused me too. And sometimes you'll even hear it about like, sci-fi.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's true at all. Honestly, I think some of that is sexism because women are the primary consumers of romance, and so, get the ladies out of our horror. Um, I suspect some of it is from that. But I disagree entirely. Like you said, I think that horror is a perfect place for romance if the story calls for it, because one thing that, a sex scene can do is really like show you who the characters are when they're behind closed doors. You get a lot of, who are these characters to each other? Who are they to themselves? How is that clashing? How is that not clashing? And, all of that is great character building, and characters are so important for a horror story. Also with the tropes thing, like romance is built on tropes the same way that horror is. And for me, it's really interesting because, a romance novel ends with a happily ever after, and a horror novel ends with a happily never after. And so with this book, I did deliberately want to put those two genres together to be like, can I end with a happily ever after that is also a happily never after? So I think it was kind of intentional.
You can, in fact, do that.
Yes,
And
apparently.
you can have both of those at the same time. But, like, that's so strange because you could just imagine any horror story could be a romance. Like, yeah, they end up together at the end, so they'll be happy in that respect, but they're messed up because they've gone through some stuff. So,
Yeah.
it's kind of both. I'm just saying.
Yeah. And I mean, in a romance novel, if you really think beyond the happily ever after, they're probably going to have to go to therapy for some of the stuff that they went through together, especially because they always have a dark past. They
Yeah.
always have deep, dark traumas that, came into play at some point throughout the course of the romance novel. So
Yeah.
is it happily? At some point, they're going to fight.
Maybe it's not happily never after. Maybe it's like happily
Yeah.
after many years of therapy, possibly.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, but still, same basic idea, I think. Yeah.
Yeah.
I can't think of a lot of horror stories. I'm trying to think of some that I've either read or seen or it feels like it is a happily ever after. Sometimes it's just the way they frame them. Even when like the two characters that are clearly in love are together at the end, it doesn't feel like they're very happy about it. It's just sort of like this is the only comfort I have at this moment because all our friends are dead. Like,
It follows.
oh, is that happily ever after though? Like,
Yeah, it's yeah, in the way that we're talking about it, yeah.
yeah, that's fair. Yeah, that's fair. I need to. I don't know that I can. I love that movie. It's
I guess Pearl is in some ways
Yeah.
for the characters. But
yeah. I'm gonna be thinking about. I have Shutter, so I will probably turn that on later. I'll be thinking about. Yeah, I
all right,
didn't
to
like
change.
the ending. But anyway, I'm sorry. Please.
No, that's just to change directions a little bit in a question. One of the things I wanted to ask is more of a process question about writing. This is your first novel. You're really well known for short fiction, as we mentioned at the beginning, and have had a lot of success in that. What was it like? At what point? What was it like transitioning to novel? But then also, at what point did you decide I want to do a novel, and this is what I want to do, or this is the moment to do it?
It was grueling. It was awful.
Oh.
No, I started writing novels actually many years ago. I had an encounter with an agent, and she was like, "This short story you wrote, it should be a novel." And at the time, I was like, "No, it shouldn't." I hate when people say that. People don't like short stories enough, and they should appreciate it as a short story. And then I started thinking about it, and I was like, "Okay, I think it would actually make a pretty good novel." So I wrote it, and that one was horrible. It was, I mean, the prose was not the best because it's my first novel, and your first novel is often pretty bad. But also the process was really difficult for me as someone who writes very short. And I actually I am the kind of writer who underwrites. So I'm often having to add stuff in. So for a short story writer who underwrites her fiction, having to write a novel was a really, really difficult thing just to sustain for that long. So I wrote that novel. I wrote several after that. None of them got picked up by publishers. They are varying degrees of successful now that I look back on them. Like, I do see where they could be improved upon, and maybe someday I'll revisit them. But this is the first one that got picked up. So I have been
Okay.
trying to have a novel published for many, many years, probably 10 years, I guess. I think this is like my fourth or fifth novel that I wrote and that got sent around.
Okay.
Wow.
Yeah. It
Well,
got
congratulations.
easier. Thank you.
I imagine so. So is Sabrina kind of the late arrival of Sabrina, also an offshoot of that sort of underwriting process? Okay.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So I was working with my agent at the time, and she was like, "I think it needs another perspective," and so that's when we added in Sabrina. And I'm really
Okay.
glad. Like that was a great
Yeah,
note, because I think it really added a dimension to the novel that it didn't have before.
Mm-hmm. And it enhances Linda's story,
Yeah.
right? By the two playing off of each other, it adds its own thing, but then it also augments everything else. So, yeah.
Yeah. And I got to write about, how people are seeing Linda from the outside, which was a really fun
Right.
exercise.
But then all through this, you're still doing a ton of short work still.
You mean like as I was writing it, I was doing short
Yes,
work? Or
yeah.
oh yeah.
Through these years, I mean, you've continued your output of short fiction. So
Yeah, I'm not nearly as prolific as I used to be. I used to be like, if I don't get my 1,000 words in every day, I'll hate myself. Went to therapy for that. And they were like, you can be easier on yourself. So I'm much easier on myself these days, which is great. It does mean that I'm less productive when it comes to short fiction, but I dabble still. Right now, I'm actually I work for that game company for my day job, which takes up a lot of time, and then I'm actually learning how to do game dev, how to program in Unreal. So that's actually what I've been working on for the last 6 months.
Okay. You're gonna make a game. Is that
Yeah, I'm making a game.
okay? Oh, I'm gonna have to.
Yeah.
How do romance games work? For one, that's like unfamiliar with that genre in general, more or less. But
yeah, so I work for a mobile game company, and it's interactive fiction. It just so happens that like romance is the main genre that has transitioned into this interactive fiction field in the mobile market. Other apps have tried horror and sci-fi and fantasy. Just romance readers are, I think, so there's such voracious readers that like they just want to consume as much as humanly possible. So it works well for them. But then I am a big fan of dating sims. I'm just like, I'm a rom-com fan. I watch dating shows. I play dating sims. Like romantic relationships are something I'm very interested in thinking about and writing about. And so I do play a lot of dating sims on Nintendo Switch and PlayStation. And so that is like a whole other thing. That's not what I do for my day job, but that is what I'm doing on my own. It's making a dating sim. Well, not on my own. I have a team. I'm working with some friends.
I'm curious then. I've played some interactive games before that are more like an interactive story where the amount of sort of activity on the part of the user is a little bit more simplified so that they can focus on the story. I even was doing, some people in chat right now may have remembered me like not knowing that's what we were going to be doing, but we were watching like an interactive story. Said it was very interactive, but it was mostly us just going through an experience together and not knowing exactly what kind of experience we were going to have. So we didn't know at what point it was going to get spicy. Because every time we were like, "Is this the moment?" Because it's like a woman gets trapped in house with vampire hottie, basically, and at any moment it could be. And so I'm kind of curious, like when it comes to like writing for that sort of medium, do you find that quite different from sort of writing fiction, or do you find it very similar? Like where, if there is a difference, where does that kind of arrive?
Yeah, with mobile, the difference is kind of easy in that you're monetizing. So you're very much writing to monetize. It's free. The game that I work for is freemium, so you can download it for free, but then there are choices throughout that you have to pay to get the content from. In terms of writing a dating sim, it's different in that it relies more on dialogue because you have the player character who is romancing these other characters. And so you're forming the relationship with them, and the physicality that would be in the narration lines, you're getting a little bit more of that in the sprite who's appearing on screen. So you're mostly just working on fun banter back and forth and the revealing of information through dialogue. So actually, compared to the old adage show don't tell in fiction, which is not a hard and fast rule by any means, there's a lot more telling in video game writing.
Interesting.
Now, while doing that dialogue, do you still have room for character development within that? Or is that something that's given to you and you just supply dialogue according to that?
Yeah, oftentimes you're developing the character through the dialogue. So with the dating sim, you'll get the character development by going on dates with the character. And at first, maybe, for example, the character is like, I've always wanted to be a fashion designer. I'm getting this example from one of my favorites, which is called Boyfriend Dungeon. I've always wanted to be a fashion designer, but I've been way too scared to do it. And then the second date, she takes you and she's like, this is something I designed. Do you like it? And then, you say, oh, I love it. It's so cute. And then the third date, she's like, I have a surprise for you. Like, I've been working on my own designs. And then, by the end of the story, she's going to open her own shop. And thanks to you, you encouraged me. And thanks. And we should, stay together. What do you think about that? So that's kind of how you handle character development. As for the player, that's a little bit more difficult. And that's something that some dating sims have, and other dating sims kind of make the player invisible. So it's more of a self-insert. We are trying to make that character have their own arcs.
That's gotta be tough, because if you are trying to give agency to the player, the more agency you give them, the more possibilities that get woven into it, and then it gets really complicated, and then you end up with like those bananas decision trees for games that are like a terabyte, or not even a ter. What is it, like whatever's bigger than like 1,000 gigs, whatever that is, like hexa gigabyte, whatever that is. Yeah. So then you need like a supercomputer from NASA to just to download the damn thing.
Yeah, that's what you have to be careful about is the choices and giving a sense of autonomy while basically just feeding back into the main story over and over again.
Bit of like mind manipulation.
Yeah.
Yeah. The illusion of having real choice, but yeah.
Like a reality show.
Yeah, very
Exactly.
much. I don't know if you've ever played Until Dawn before.
Yeah, I love that game.
That game scares the bejesus out of me. It's so good though.
Oh, it's freaky.
Yeah. And you might like it, Daniel. It's less game than it is more story that you interact with. There are moments where your dexterity with the buttons has a little bit of an impact, but it is really like experiencing a story kind of happening like in real time, like watching a very long movie, but you get to make choices. Very creepy, and has a wonderful cast who play the various characters. Supposedly they're working on a movie. Supposedly.
Yeah, we talked about that with the movie podcast we had, I think.
Can't wait. Cannot wait.
The video game adaptation one, yeah.
Yeah, if they get actual Harry to come in, I'd be hilarious. Although I think now maybe a little.
Oh, they're working on an Until Dawn movie?
Is it Until Dawn movie or okay? Hold on. Now we gotta do this again. I could have sworn
that game company. I don't know if you know this, probably, but they've put out a bunch of mini games. So like Until Dawn is a longer game, and then The Quarry is another one of their longer games, and then they have all these much shorter games that are like 4 to 5 hour playtime. but they're all horror stories, the exact same.
Universe?
No, not universe, just the exact same gameplay. Yeah. So
okay.
you're responding to QuickTime events with minimal walking around and exploring and reading documentation to get some of the story. I've played all but one, and I'm playing that one right now. So I'm a big fan of that studio.
So this year, January, was when Sony announced that they're doing a film adaptation directed by David F. Sandberg, with Harry Dauberman doing a pass on the script original. Yeah, so he's doing the script, I guess, but it was originally written by someone named Blair Butler. From Attack of the Show. I'm having like a brain melt right now. What? Okay. And then supposedly, as of June 2024. Oh, we got casting. Ella Rubin, Michael Cimino, Ji Young Yu, who is a South Korean actor. I probably have mispronounced that. And then Odessa Azion. They're going to be in it. No idea who that is, but it's going to be produced by Screen Gems. So,
but it's happening.
We're going to get it. It's going to so happen. Oh my God.
That's great. I'm excited.
I might actually go back to a movie because that game, like, you know, when you get so scared by like something you watch, like a horror thing, and like your skin starts to crawl.
Yeah.
You're like, I need a break. There's like a handful of things that have done that. Until
Yeah.
Dawn and Alien Isolation. Yeah.
I just saw Long Legs today. There were moments that, yeah.
Scary. Those video games.
That had that creepiness.
Yeah. Those video games are especially terrifying for me because I play them with my husband, and he turns off all the lights and refuses to turn them on. And then every time I scream, because he's made the situation so scary, and then there's a jump scare on screen, and I scream, and he's like, oh, why do you scream? Oh my God, you're terrifying me. It's like, you've made this very spooky.
The lights go on.
Yeah.
I'm a baby. I've become a recent horror convert, but I'm a baby. Yeah, like slashers don't scare me. I mean, they can be uncomfortable sometimes because the way they murder can be a little gross. But you know, sometimes you get stuff and you're like, no, that's like It Follows. Like, yeah, I've seen that twice, and I don't know that I can go back. It's really terrifying. Good movie.
I'm also a baby. I'm very gullible, but I'm a good sport about it because my friends and my husband do enjoy intentionally spooking and pranking me, and it brings them so much joy that I'm like, okay, I'll do it for you guys.
Okay, now I have to probe this a little bit. But you write horror.
Yeah.
But
square the circle.
It's relatively new to you.
Yeah, I only started watching horror 6 years ago. I was way too scared to watch it. It would give me nightmares. And so I started watching it with I met my husband at the time and started watching it with him. And then at this, just like my friends got really excited by the fact that I was watching it, and so they were like, "Oh, we got to watch all the horror with Bonnie, because she gets really scared, and we love that." And so then I started writing it because it's what I was watching all the time, and I'm not as scared by reading it. Like I said, I am scared of haunting stories, but reading gets me less freaked out than watching it.
Interesting. I get I can kind of.
Yeah, I'm the same.
Yeah, reading is less scary. Yeah, I agree. That like The Shining is more terrifying than the book, even though the book, I think, is a very terrifying book. But no, I feel like with a film, like if it feels weird to stop, but you can't really finish novels in like one sitting, especially not The Shining, because that thing's like 8,000 pages long. But yeah.
But with the soundtrack and the noises and all that.
And all the blood.
That really, yeah. It's not even just the visuals, but yeah.
And the jumps.
Yeah, the jumps really that are created through that, yeah.
It does work differently. I wonder, someone has got to have written about like why. Why is it that film is far more terrifying? I mean, the answer is probably something really mundane, like, well, it's visual and we're more visually operated. Like, but
Yeah.
still,
Yeah.
where's the
Yeah.
neuroscience when we need?
It's like the very first motion picture, like scared people to death. They thought the train was going to come out of the screen and like hit them and run them over, and it's like just inherently that the unfamiliarity, I guess, was
I think
scary.
that's what it is for me. It's like having that visual in front of me.
Yeah, it's a little more, especially with the special effects getting as good as they can get now, where you can, make a body look like it's really like decomposed, or look like someone's really had something horrible happen, or a dude really does come through the wall and it's like, "Rah, rah, rah," like,
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I will say I really appreciate about horror, less so than a lot of other genres, which is I feel like horror hasn't abandoned the practical effect in a way that a lot of other cinemas has. That is like the hallmark of horror, is how do we make this as real as possible, even if you're using
Mm.
some camera trickery. Like, it's just
Right.
infinitely more terrible. Like, if you think about it, like,
Because you realize that the CGI stuff doesn't actually look real necessarily.
yeah. It's like when you watch original Aliens 1979, right? And you're watching this, that puppet thing costume doesn't really move very well because it's limited. So they just shoot it in this way that makes it infinitely more terrifying. So when you get these close-up shots of like one in somebody's face, like, it's so tense. It's so tense. And if they just did it with like CG, I don't think it would work. I just don't think it fits, like with the water glistening off it, and it's so good.
Yeah, you can get the goopier effect too, which is just like, I don't know, it just
Hmm.
icks you out. Or it's like the Jaws thing too sometimes.
Yeah.
If they would have actually been able to make the animatronic work, then the
Hmm.
movie wouldn't have been as scary because I mean, really, when you look at it, it's not as scary when you're seeing the whole thing than when you're
Yeah.
seeing bits and pieces of it. And um,
Yeah, and that's actually makes the shark even more terrifying, because like the idea of the shark is it's underneath you and you don't know it's there until it's too late. That's
mhm.
so if you don't see it, even for the audience, it's like, oh, everybody's safe. Look, he's just swimming. Everything's fine. And yeah. Oh,
I love
anyway,
practical effects too. I agree 100%.
love the practical
Well,
effect a lot.
before we close out, are there any questions from Twitch in the chat, Shaun?
Yeah, does anyone have any questions? Go ahead and throw them up while I just do a quick scroll to see if there's anything in here. I do have a comment from Griffith, who said, regarding romance and horror, I'm thinking of the end of the original Fright Night, where Charlie has saved Amy and they're together, but then in Fright Night 2, a few years later, she's never mentioned and Charlie is dating someone else.
So
It
sad.
is super
Why'd they do
sad.
that to us? I haven't seen Fright Night 2, but I've seen Fright Night, and I love that death scene. It's one of my favorites.
I've never seen Fright Night.
It's gooey.
It's gooey?
Speaking of goo, yeah.
Oh, goo doesn't bug me. I like Ghostbusters.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess the silly kind of horror can kind of like Gremlins kind of
Yeah.
has a happy ending, but also not happy.
Yeah, I think when you get like the PG or PG-13 horror,
Yeah.
it's got the happy ending.
That's true. Yeah. Trivet is saying that I need to see Friday Night, so I guess I'm going to see if that's on Shutter and I can watch that. I'll offer one more comment and then we can close out so that Bonnie can have a life without us. But Trivet did say earlier when we were talking about hamster wheels, uh, when we mentioned Tchaikovsky, she thought we meant Adrian Tchaikovsky, the science fiction novelist, and that she said
He's
he'd
still
probably
alive.
go along with it, but his eyebrows would be angry because his eyebrows are always angry. So there you go. I'll ask Adrian what he thinks, if he would be willing to go into a giant human-sized hamster wheel, and if so, I'm pretty sure he'll be at Glasgow, so we have to find him one.
Yes, please ask if it would be a punishment or a reward.
That's a good
Because
point.
that's the pressing question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I will ask him. I'll send him a message. I don't think I know him well enough to just like cold ask it with no context. So I probably have to provide context. But my temptation is to just ask the question with no context. But I don't think I know him well enough, so I won't. Well, we do have the two quick closing out questions. The one which you kind of hinted at, which is, what are you working on next?
Yeah. So I'm building a video game. It's actually a beat 'em up, dating sim. So I left that part out. Yeah. It's called Bad Heroes, and it's about these B-level heroes who work at a Heroes for Hire agency, and then the receptionist is the player character, and you get to date them, and you also get to send them on missions and do little beat 'em ups. So it's been really fun, like learning a new skill, because for so long I felt like, well, I'm good at writing, but I'm not great at anything else. So being able to say, well, I'm actually picking up, game dev,
Cool.
it's been nice. Yeah. And also I am working on a novel, but it's so slow because I'm mostly all my time is consumed with the game.
Okay. And then the other question would be, if folks want to find you and your work, where is it?
Yeah. It's at BonnieJoStufflebeam.com. Believe it or not, I am the only Bonnie Jo Stufflebeam in the world.
Oh, really?
I hope so, because I've been saying that for a long time.
Oh, wow. Okay, I'll contact the IRS. We'll find out. I'm not actually going to do that, just to be clear. That's weird.
Okay, good. Please don't. I don't want to be audited.
No, nobody wants to be audited. Ugh. I dread whenever there's an IRS letter, even though if it's just letting me know it's tax season, don't forget. And I'm just like, no, this is you telling me you're going to audit me. You'll find the $1 I didn't report, and then I get a $10,000 fine. Jerks.
So the unique name is a good thing and not a punishment, then? And here.
I like it. I think it works well because people like to say silly stuff about it. And so I've started to kind of collect those silly things that people have said. There's a part on my website where I was writing them down. I should go and collect them, the ones that have come up since then, and add them to the list. But I think a lot of reviewers find it satisfying to try to come up with some silly thing to say about my name.
And there's got to be a fairly sizable percentage that in the review wonder, is this a pen name? I don't know, but... Well,
I get asked that. I get asked that all the time. My favorite was Mer Lafferty. I think she said, Bonnie Jo Stufflebeam has the Harry Potteringest name I've ever heard in my life.
It is. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, so true.
I could totally see that as a character in that universe. Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm gonna be thinking about that for the rest of the night. Thank you. Well, thank you, Bonnie, very much for coming on the show. It was a pleasure to have you.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Welcome. For folks at home, sorry, I just saw in chat Bonnie Jo Hufflepuff. I guess that's you now. No, you don't have to do that.
I love it.
So for folks at
Call the
home,
IRS.
No, don't call the IRS. No, leave them out of this. We don't even know about your second income you don't report because of its other name. All right, folks at home, if you had any thoughts about this episode or past episodes, please go to skiffyandfanty.com/listener suggestions. You can also send us an email at skiffyandfanty@gmail.com and suggest topics to us as well. We are Skiffy and Fanty pretty much anywhere except the one really bad place that we're not at. But you can find like our Patreon and our newsletter and pretty much all the socials we're active on our link tree, which is linktr.ee/skiffyandfanty. Please leave reviews, join our Patreon, and give us all your money because we're poor. Oh, we need a little bit. Me, I'm at ShaunDuke.net. I am here on Alphabet Streams where I stream almost every Tuesday, Thursday at 7 p.m. Skiffy and Fanty is here Fridays at 7 p.m. That's Central Time. You can come here for that. I also have a link tree, which is just /Shaun Duke, and I have lots of things and I'm various places.
You can find me on Blue Sky at Reading 1000 Lives. That's 101000. And you can read my reviews on the Skiffy and Fanty blog or reading1000lives.com and many other places as well.
Excellent. Oh, as is required by the Skiffy and Fanty bylaws, I have to make it awkward. And Daniel does not know this, but before this show, I signed him up for a new reality TV show where they pair people together based on their bacterial cultures in their gut. The belief being that based on new science coming out of Daniel's field, that if you can find the right combination, you actually will find your soulmate. Yeah.
Well, that actually plays into things already.
Yeah.
Just normal.
Yeah, it is pretty normal. You're correct. Yeah.
Yeah. Opposites attract. Opposite microbiomes.
Yeah. There's probably a great pun to be made, and I'm sure Paul will come up with it in chat later, but I don't know what to do with that. But there you go. So I'm looking forward, although Daniel is married, so this is a little awkward.
May the microbes be with you.
On that note, awkward ending ends.